And you're recording.
Okay, well, today I'm going to try to talk to you about what we call Good Friday. Now, none of the gospel writers were there when it happened. They came along later. But there was a man named John Mark. His father was probably a Roman because Marcus is a Roman name, and his mother was Jewish. And as time went on, when the missionaries were going here and there, he joined Peter, who had two names. Petros was the Greek name, and Simon was a Hebrew name. Aha, that's my middle name. So we'll find the earliest stories in the Gospel of Mark. Because when a very wicked emperor named Nero decided to get rid of Christians and Jews because they wouldn't call him God, dear, Peter had told the stories that Mark remembered. And so he took the stories that had been told to him by Peter and wrote them down. And I'm going to read, therefore, from the Gospel of Mark. It says, the festival of Passover was coming through soon. Now, the festival of Passover was a feast of freedom. It's about those times when Moses and his sister Miriam led the people out of Egypt. So it was a happy time. And they would have a Passover lamb to be slaughtered, or a little goat. And they'd still be eating the unleavened bread of the wilderness as a special way to remember those times. Now, that special bread was what, well, down in Mexico, they call it tortillas. In Norway, it's flatbrød. So it says, the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lambs were being slaughtered, his disciples said to him, where would you like us to go and prepare for our Passover supper? And he explained, he had some wealthy friends there in Jerusalem, and they let them use the house. It had a large room, so they were wealthy people. And that's where they prepared the Passover. Then come the words that we like to remember. During the meal, he took bread, and having said the blessing, and the blessing is in his language, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Take this. This is my body. What? He passed the bread around, and they each took some. Then he took a cup, and having offered thanks to God, and that's also in his language, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu hamotzi yayin min ha'anavim. After singing the Passover hymn, which was a rather cheerful hymn because they were celebrating a feast, it wasn't sad at all, and the feast ended with a cup of wine, which could have made them a little sleepy. Then they reached a place called Gethsemane. Now, Gethsemane simply means an olive press for making olive oil, because this was a place still called Har HaZeitim, the Mount of Olives. And there they were after the meal, and he went away from them for a little bit, He said, "Sit here while I pray." And he took Peter and James and John with him. And then they began to watch as horror and dismay came over him. And he said, "My heart is ready to break with grief. Stop here and stay awake." Then he went forward a little bit, threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, this hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "all things are possible. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what thou wilt." He came back and found them asleep. And he said to Peter, "Asleep, Simon? Well, after all, they'd had a cup of wine. Weren't you able to take to watch with me 1 hour? Oh, well, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Okay. Then all of a sudden, the temple cops came and arrested Jesus. Well, he had gotten himself in a bit of trouble over in the city when he criticized them for the way they tried to make money out of the Passover meal. And they were out to get him. So they led Jesus away to the high priest's house, where the chief priests and the elders of the city and the great scholars were all assembling. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the high priest's courtyard. And there he remained, sitting among the attendants, warming himself at a fire. And he was asked all kinds of questions. And he didn't say much of anything. They accused him of trying to become a king. No, he didn't try to become a king. He believed that God was the only king. Meanwhile, Peter was still in the courtyard downstairs. One of the high priest's serving maids came by and saw him there warming himself. She looked into his face and said, "You were there too, with this man from Nazareth, this Jesus." But he denied it. "I know nothing," he said. "I don't understand what you mean." Then he went outside into the porch, and the maid saw him there again and began to say to the bystanders, "He's one of them." And again, he denied it. Again, a little later, a bystander said to Peter, "Surely you are one of them. You must be. You talk like a Galilean." At this, he broke into curses, and with an oath, he said, "I don't know the man you speak of." And the rooster crowed, and all of a sudden, it was morning, and Peter remembered what he had done. When morning came, the chief priests, having made their plan with the elders and the lawyers and all the council, put Jesus in chains and led him away and handed him over to Pontius Pilate. Now, Pilate was the governor. He was a Roman. And so Pilate questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "The words are yours." The chief priests brought many charges against him, but they didn't all agree with each other. So Pontius Pilate questioned him again, "Have you nothing to say in your own defense? You see how many charges they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no further reply. So they took him out to crucify him. Oh, what a painful way to die. A man called Simon from Cyrene. Oh, that wonderful name that I like. Simon means someone who listens. Who came from over North Africa, what we would call Libya today. And they told him to help carry the cross. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull. They offered Jesus drugged wine, which is kind because then he wouldn't feel so badly when they nailed his hands to the cross. And they fastened him to the cross, and they divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide which each should have. The hour of the crucifixion was 9 o'clock in the morning. That's the way we have our time. And the inscription giving the charge against him, the King of the Jews. Well, he never claimed to be a king. Yeah. And a number of women were also present, watching from a distance. Among them were Mary of Magdala, Mary the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph and Salome, women who had followed him and waited on him all the way from Galilee. Yeah, as Jesus went from here to there with his disciples, and disciples simply means students, there were these motherly women who kind of watched out for them, making sure they had meals and sometimes a place to sleep. Well, there was a man there named Joseph from Arimathea, a respected member of the council. And he admired Jesus. So he went to Pontius Pilate and asked if he could take the body of Jesus down from the cross. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. So he sent for the centurion, that's the officer in charge of the police, and asked him whether it was long since he died. And when he heard the centurion's report, he gave Joseph leave to take the dead body. So Joseph bought a linen sheet, took his body down from the cross, wrapped him in the sheet, and laid him in a tomb cut out of the rock, and rolled a stone against the entrance. Now on the southeast side of Jerusalem, there's a valley full of tombs. And these tombs are cut into the rock. They're like little caves. And the limestone is soft there. So they laid him in the tomb and rolled a stone against the entrance, because they don't want any wild animals to come and eat it. And Mary of Magdala and Mary, the mother of Joseph, were watching and saw where he was laid. Well, that's the way it was. He was crucified. And we have a song about that. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Well, that's where I'll leave it for now, and then I'll be back in front of the screen in a little bit with the story of Easter morning.